During the early days, all along the Willamette River, towns were vying to become the commercial center of the Oregon Territory. In 1851, Portland settlers drove the Great Plank Road through to the rich farmland of the Tualatin Valley, thus connecting the wagons to the ships and making Portland the booming port city it is today. That road went through a neighborhood called Goose Hollow. This is one story about that neighborhood.
I live in a neighborhood on the edge of downtown called Goose Hollow. That's why my editor called me over.
Hey, Melissa, you got a second?
Sure.
I'd appreciate it if you'd do me a favor.
He asked me to stop and see an old woman in my neighborhood who had stumbled on a manuscript, an old family journal. He thought it would make a good story.
Okay. It's kind of cute. You know, there's a lot of good stuff in this.
Hello? Oh, in here. I'm Anne. You must be Melissa. Right. Oh, you keep saying that it's all over there. Okay, and take your pictures if you don't mind.
As a young boy in the 1880s, Percival Jeffcott had lived above Goose Hollow on a hill called Gander Ridge. Jeffcott wrote the journal from memory and gave it to his family in 1954. Memories from his boyhood as he watched the neighborhood grow along the Great Plank Road.
Oh my goodness. Oregonian, 1852. Advises women to stay indoors when it rains, given the danger of showing their ankles in public. How would you look at that? This is a picture of a woman that lived right down the street. They moved her out when the freeway came in. Old folks don't take to moving.
Bring anything? No. Hi, Phil. Okay. See you later.
Many of the people who live here in the hollow walk to work or ride their bicycles. The rents in the area have always been low, and the people come from a variety of backgrounds. The houses on my block are close together, so you can't help but know your neighbors. Nobody knows exactly how the hollow got its name, but the Chinese women kept geese for feathers in the 1800s, and migrating birds used to stop here at local watering holes, long since gone. The journal is a window on a boyhood, a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds from a time long past. Most of our escapades centered on a large stream called Tanner Creek. There we caught trout, crawfish, and eels. It formed our favorite swimming hole on Jacob Cam's property. The bottomland of the stream, along the West Hills, had been taken over by the Chinese vegetable gardeners. The Chinese were the victims of much violence by Portland's labor community. Brought to Oregon to work on the railroads, they worked cheap and hard. But the white workers' fear for their own jobs led to rioting and drove the original Chinese community out of Portland. We boys taunted the Chinese, mimicking our elders. Drinking and fighting were common in the Hollow. It was the center of an Irish and German immigrant settlement. The inhabitants were truckers, graders, and street contractors, which accounted for the many horses and stables in the area. Tanner Creek was finally enclosed in a trunk sewer. The Chinese gardens were filled in, giving rise to the Multnomah Athletic Club field. We boys groped our way through the sewer and paid our last respects to its magical waters. Oh, really, it's a good story. I'm telling you, I was up half the night reading that journal. That guy is talking about a stream, a creek, running right through that neighborhood with fishing, trout, the works. It's great stuff. Come on.
All right.
All right.
You got a deal.
Okay.
Now what about the copy block?
Hey, I can handle it. I'll take care of it. I'll get you everything you need. I'll get all the background. I'll get you names, dates, quotes. One tradition, begun by Percival Jeffcott and his friends, still continues. These folks call themselves the Tanner Creek Expedition, and they regularly float the creek. But it's not the body of water that Jeffcott knew. Over the years, the neighborhood has become divided and squeezed by freeways and commercial development. These pressures will always exist, as they do in all city neighborhoods. But Goose Hollow is still healthy. What makes a neighborhood healthy? And how does it stay that way? At the Oregon Historical Society, Terry O'Donnell said that little has been written about the area.
This is Canyon Road, and the creek, of course the road wasn't there then, the creek came down through that canyon across what is now the Civic Stadium, and then in the northeasterly direction down to the river. So there was a tannery there, right, where the Civic Stadium is now. Daniel Lounsdale set it up in 1846. And it was very important to the development of the town, to the whole region, because leather was absolutely essential. You had to have it for shoes, of course, also for clothing, buckskin, but in particular for harnesses and saddles. A horse in those days without leather was rather like an automobile today without oil and gasoline. One thing that we forget about is that before the railroads, most towns didn't develop unless they were places where the wagons could meet the ships. And Portland was that kind of place. It had a good deep river harbor, and then the Great Plank Road, which brought the laden wagons into the docks. Then some settlers, early settlers, came in the late 1840s. The Carters, who settled in that area. And then Amos King. Amos King built a rather grand house, and I think we have a photograph of it here. Near the present-day stadium, which is why you get the name Kings Hill, some of his children, one of these children, one of his boys, once remarked that the forests were so dense that if you wanted to see anything except trees, you had to look straight up.
Hey, Phil.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, pretty good. And you? How's your project coming up here on the hill?
Oh, it's coming pretty good.
Bill Philpot used to be in the roofing business, but devotes most of his time now to raising orchids and traveling around the world judging orchid shows.
Ooh, smells so great in here. Is that a new one? Oh, God, that's beautiful. It's great.
It's not exactly rare, but it's really different.
Beautiful.
Phil and Ruthie have lived here for
Well,
35 years.
I think it is. Now,
Ruthie was once in the theater.
there was a time when things were coming this way pretty strong, but it's kind of, the freeway stopped it.
Well, whose home was it that took that big apartment on the corner up there? It was,
Which part are you talking about now?
well, the one right up here, just a kitty across from Francis.
Well, that was the Hazeltine home.
The Hazeltine home.
That
Yeah.
was a big house, see. And then the Hadley house was the Jackson home. Mrs. Jackson hadn't moved out of there very long, and she deeded it to the Women's Club, and they sold it to the Hadley house, see. The first one that was built, I think, was the Portland Towers, if I remember. Oh, they were both about the same night. And what was where the King Tower is, I don't recall. But right across where they put in those motel type things, see. God, there was a big house in there that they tore down. God, it had beautiful woodwork in it.
Welcome, folks, to Kings Hill Historical Walking Tour, brought to you by the Goose Hollow Foothills League, which is the neighborhood association in which Kings Hill is located. The large apartment towers you see, like the vacant lot across the street, all at one time had exceedingly fine homes on them. The neighborhood, since its inception, was the location of some of the most influential and important people in the city of Portland and Oregon. It was the home of legislators. Several governors lived in the neighborhood. A number of very prominent businessmen that you'd all recognize. Olds and King, Meyer and Frank, Lippman and Wolf, all had homes in this area. Even with the changes that have occurred over the last several decades, it's still one of the largest concentrations of historically significant residences in the entire city.
Mrs. Hayes, Mrs. Cabell, and Mrs. Lupton grew up on Kings Hill. Theirs was a close-knit community that, in the past, wielded enough power to divert a freeway from this very spot. Hildreth Lupton was the first woman in Oregon to learn to fly.
The airport looked awfully long to me, but I made a very bumpy landing and finally stopped the plane and in great relief jumped out of it, fell and broke my ankle. And I was in a cast for 6 weeks.
Kings Hill is unique. But as the city grows and development pressures increase, the integrity of Kings Hill is disappearing. The neighborhood has petitioned the city for historical designation to preserve its character. The proposal is in limbo. What will happen is anyone's guess. Goose Hollow began as a swamp. Malaria and leprosy were common in the Chinese colony. It has always been known for its low rents, its worker housing, and a rich mixture of people, young and old, rich and poor, artist and worker. But economic forces are at work here too. As land values rise, the problem of keeping low-cost housing increases. Like the hill, the character of the hollow is also at stake. The Gordon Court Apartments are an example. The building was sold to a developer and all the tenants were evicted.
I'm still here. There are a couple reasons for that. About 2 months ago, the neighborhood, the Goose Hollow neighborhood and the Gander Ridge neighborhood got really involved in this question too, because it certainly affects more than the tenants of the building. It affects the neighborhood.
Joan Vallejo and the other tenants began raising money to buy the building themselves and run it as a cooperative.
The city of Portland is in the midst of a housing crisis, and so tearing down available housing for low and middle income people is not a real effective way of alleviating that housing crisis. If you're talking about putting in condominiums that are going to cost between $75,000 and $150,000, that's not where the housing shortage is in that kind of housing. So I feel a real personal commitment to making sure that this stays.
Time ran out and a demolition permit was issued, but the spirit of the neighborhood prevailed. Instead of a funeral, they threw a wake. The battle to save the Gordon Court is symbolic of neighborhood apprehension surrounding new developments. Will new structures fit in with their surroundings? Will the new tenants become part of the neighborhood? At a meeting of the Neighborhood Association, Dean Smith summed it up.
One of the key elements in neighborhoods is the mix of people. If you have people of different ethnic backgrounds, different age backgrounds, different income backgrounds, that makes a neighborhood. It makes a community of people that relate well to each other. The Gordon Court apartment demolition was a particularly severe blow, particularly for the Gander Ridge area of Goose Hollow, because it destroyed part of that mix that made it a very special area.
The League was formed to serve as a grapevine for community information and for grassroots organization. Its goals: to preserve livability and the traditions that make Goose Hollow unique. It has become an integral part of the city planning process. There is a lot to be done. With the demolition of the Gordon Court, a new issue is born. What will replace it? In the heart of the hollow, beside what was once called the Great Plank Road, sits Bud Clark's legendary Goose Hollow Tavern.
There you go, Kenneth. Thank you, bud. Thank you.
Here, Bud gives sustenance to architects and artists, loggers and lawyers, truckers, storytellers.
How are you today?
Okay, how are you doing?
Well, I'm all right. What do you need? Don't break the glasses.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Yeah?
These are pictures. There's a series of pictures of bridges here and different transportation. Actually, you should probably start here because this, I wasn't here when this happened. Really? But that's the Jefferson Street depots and it goes up to where the reservoirs are. That, from there, they went to making a cable car that went up to Portland Heights. It went from 18th Street up 18th Street, and that's where the name Cable Street came from.
If there is one collective memory in every neighborhood, then for the hollow it is the cable car. You could ride it for a nickel. It was a real estate scheme that worked. Occasionally it would get loose and plunge down the hill.
A baseball team in 1931. Now, baseball was great at that time. People played baseball, fighting was a big deal, it was important, athletics were important. And that took the emphasis off fighting in the streets, I think. Anyway, I didn't know there was boxers, but there were boxers in the area, and they came out of this area. Brandon's dad knows about it. He lives close by, and you ought to talk to him, and he'll tell you what's going on in this neighborhood.
Okay, good.
And he used to hang by his legs from the bridge up there. He told me all kinds of things about the neighborhood. You know?
Across the street here, on this corner over here, were the Blairs, and there's people over here were sextons, or not sextons, they were Frainies, and him was Franey. He was a contractor sometime. Up the street there, on the corner house up there.
The pink one.
Yeah. There's a family named of Berger. Jim Berger. He was older than I, but they claim that he was a baseball player, and they claim that he was one of the first men to throw a curveball.
Oh, this one right
here.
here.
This big yard here, and the next house was a colored family named Crawford lived there. He was a slave.
Really?
They were the finest family you ever met. They were wonderful people. And then this house here, there was a bakery in the basement of it. They were built out. They built out the street here.
So could you get a view from the cable car looking back down at the...
Yeah, yes, you could look all the way down to Chapman and Jefferson where the turnaround was.
It's a lot different with the cable running up through here.
Yeah, the cable car started right up about where the end of that road is there. So that's about the extent of that up here on up. That's the old cable street. And on the corner was the famous Goose Hollow Saloon. That was a family affair. It was nice. There was nobody in trouble. Next to that, coming this way here, of course, 18 was Herrick. Mr. Herrick had a grocery store in there. Then up in 16th was Kramer's Riding Academy. And then you come across the street on 16th and right, 16th and Jefferson, there's a big hay barn there. It must have been about 100 by 150, and about 4 stories high, loaded with bale hay. Us kids used to get in there, have ropes and swings in there.
Right in there?
Yeah. And then coming this way on this corner, cross street here, was the hundreds had a carpet cleaning about the middle of the block.
How about right up here?
Well, there was vacant lots in there. That's about all.
Just pasture?
This all was in an apple orchard. They had one huge pear tree, I remember. It was about 150 feet tall. It was the tallest thing I ever saw. I remember when I was a kid, they used to break horses in on the street. You used to sit on the fence and watch them bucking the horses.
Rationale was to prove that we could live outside.
In the late 50s, Rick Rubin, Tommy Thompson, and Gordon Clark lived in what was called the Village, a collection of shacks strung through the hills above the hollow. Artists, intellectuals, students, and partygoers, they shared Portland's bohemia.
Lovely to live in while they were still tearing down Victorian houses, which are now extremely valuable, which is strange.
Many lived simply with wood stoves. They experimented with lifestyles, drugs, and language. Some grew their hair long. The village ended with the freeways. Houses were razed and people left. But the Goose Hollow crowd were young. They could adapt. When change happens, the young find it easier to adjust.
getting some pictures of the neighborhood. I thought maybe I could get some shots of you.
Sure.
This is what I usually do. Hi. I'm Melissa Maxwell. Good to meet you. Oh, is that right? Yeah? You play well?
I play country western, yeah.
Country western?
I had a band down in St. Louis, Missouri.
Is that right?
Erskine Wood is 102 years old. Erskine wrote a book about his father, an Indian fighter in the 1870s who became a radical lawyer. Erskine lived with Chief Joseph and remembers him as the finest man he ever knew, except for his father.
A painter and bon vivant, lover, poet, and satirist, champion of the oppressed, writer of roles, author of Heavenly Discourse, and Poet in the Desert, and kind and indulgent father. Such was the man of whom I write.
It sounds like he was really truly a man of many talents.
He was.
Yeah.
He was.
Goose Hollow is not just a collection of houses and people. It is a neighborhood. You can feel its past and the thread of its traditions. The landscape has the old and the new and room for growth. It is a place where people know and care about each other and sometimes come together.